Hello, good morning, everyone. We are live today, and just give us one more minute, just we can get a few more attendees on. We'll be back soon. All right, let's get started. So, welcome everyone. My name is Clemence, and I'm from Safety Chain. I'll be your webinar host today. We'll go through a quick few items. So, what's FSMA Friday? If you're new to FSMA Friday, though we do have a lot of people coming back every month, these are monthly FSMA-related news updates, regulatory changes and updates, industry trends, and a Q&A with the Atchison Group at the end. This event is brought to you by the Atchison Group and Safety Chain. Now, some housekeeping. Only the panelist microphones are on. Ask your Q&A questions at the end or start popping them in the chat. Our team will be monitoring and getting those to me so that I can ask them to Freeman. The recording will be shared, and if you're having audio issues, please use the call-in number. All right, so I'm going to introduce you today's presenter. So we've got Freeman Libby, and Freeman has 45 plus years across food safety regulation, auditing, and government program development. So he's seen the problem of food fraud from every angle. Freeman spent his career with Canadian federal agencies, including the CFIA, the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Freeman has deep auditing specialization in the categories most vulnerable to food fraud, such as seafood, meat and poultry, and commercial sterility. He also has international inspection experience on the ground in Peru, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. So he knows how fraud enters the supply chain at origin. Freeman kept his government career as National Director at the Feed Ban Task Force at CFIA. And when Freeman flags a risk, it's grounded in what he's actually seen and not just what the literature says. Welcome, Freeman. We're glad to have you today.
Thank you very much. And
All right.
hopefully everybody's really interested in food fraud and come away from today's presentation with a better understanding of food fraud, what the risks are, and how extensive it may be out there in the food processing, in the food sector world. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Freeman. All right, well, we'll go through the agenda first. We'll hear from Freeman with any recent regulatory updates. Then we'll have Freeman's presentation around the commodities most likely to cost you, fraud risk primer for food and bev manufacturers. Then we'll go through the Q&A, and then at the end, we'll have a curated safety chain demo. Let's go through any recent regulatory updates now. Freeman, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I got to admit, when I prepared this slide, things have sort of been happening. So I'm going to update what's on the slide a little bit. Cyclospora outbreaks, we're now up to 2,000 illnesses, 20,000 people affected. So that's a lot more than what we've had when I put this slide together a week and a half ago. So you can see that it is still an issue, basically impacting coming across 9 states and affecting the food chain supplies quite vigorously, so to speak. So they're still working on that. It's still an issue. There's also been recall in blueberries. There are other recalls, mobile recalls, some in blueberries, and they've affected some major retail change. And whenever you get into the retail side of the house, you get into recalls, it makes it more difficult there's always unique tracking challenges associated with retail when you're doing food recalls. And on the third side, there's food defense rule enforcement that came into place August of 2024. The FDA have indicated, or they acknowledge, I guess is the best way to put it, that they're slow off the mark in trying to enforce that. All processing plants that are registered with the FDA must have that food defense rule in place. And as I say, they're in the enforcement mode, but they're just a little slow getting off the mark. So what does this mean as far as everyone out there in the food safety world? Well, processors, organizers, anybody involved in food safety or in processing, basically they need to protect themselves and make sure that they have enhanced food safety systems where they can verify their allergen controls, make sure their suppliers are legit suppliers providing what you're supposed to be you've asked for, the specifications. Make sure that you have good traceability in place just in case there is a problem with an issue or with product, and make sure that you have good environmental monitoring and recall procedures in place too, to ensure that if problems do occur, you can catch them before product gets out into the marketplace. So that's basically it right now as far as updates on the regulatory side. So we can move on to the food fraud side. So as it was mentioned, we're going to discuss food fraud today, and I have a number of varying subjects I want to discuss on food fraud. So we'll move on to the agenda of what I'm going to cover. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some definitions. Some people get food fraud, food defense, and food safety they sort of commingle those together. So I want to talk a little bit about the differences, what the scope is of food fraud, the types of food fraud, and then we'll just briefly talk about some of the common foods that are being affected by food fraud out there in the worldwide marketplace. What are the drivers for food fraud? What are the impacts? We're going to talk about the GFSI scenarios on food fraud, what the requirements are, how they're ensuring that food fraud is paramount in their programs, and the same thing on the regulatory side. And then we'll finish up by talking about how a consumer can be basically knowledgeable on a situation and make sure that they can be heads up on any issues when they're out there in the marketplace securing product. Okay, so we're going to start with food fraud. What is food fraud? It's a simple definition. It's intentional deception using food for economic gain. That's a simple one. There's also a comprehensive one. It's a collective term used to encompass the deliberate and intentional substitution, addition or dilution, tampering, misrepresentation of food, food ingredients, food packaging, false and misleading statements made about a product for economic gain. So that's the comprehensive one. That covers, and we're going to talk about the different types of food fraud. But when I do my training I do a number of training sessions with the industry. The way I like to sum it up is food fraud is someone trying to pick your pocket. They're trying to get money out of you, not legally. And sometimes that affects the product safety as well, because it could be an issue where you got an undeclared allergen or something. So I always like to try and keep it simple for the processor. So in the case of food fraud, they're trying to pick your pocket for economic gain. Okay, what is food fraud versus food safety? Some people get that confused. So as I mentioned, food fraud is intentional adulteration or deception or basically for economic gain. Whereas food safety is if you have an issue of unintentional contamination, that's a food safety issue. Someone wasn't deliberately trying to trying to do this. It's just something broke down in their system, in their food processing system, or something happened where it wasn't intentional, but uh, it just happened, and they have a system in place to capture it and to make the corrections. Whereas food fraud is basically intention. They're trying to do something. They're not trying to correct it. They're trying to, as I say, have their economic gain, so to speak. Okay. Now, this is a one where I find people seem to get confused, and a lot of it is at the processing level. Um, Basically, you got people get food fraud and food defense mixed up. They confuse the two. And we talk about food fraud. It's the economic gain. It's nonviolent. It's just people just trying to pick your pocket. Whereas on food defense, the way I like to describe that one is someone's trying to hurt you. It's like ideological gain, intentional harm, terror motivation. If everybody goes back to the way back when, tell my age now, but the Tylenol issue, where someone, it's not food, but someone did something with the Tylenol in the pharmacies, and people ended up getting sick and dying. And so that is an issue. That's where someone's trying to hurt you. There's an instance in my neck of the woods here in eastern Canada where someone actually put needles in raw potatoes and sold those out and they were sold out onto the market. That's food defense, a food defense problem where someone is deliberately trying to help you. They're hard to detect sometimes, but again, it's that's the difference between the food fraud and food defense. Someone's trying to pick your pocket, someone's trying to hurt you. Just keep that in mind as far as the two differences. Okay, so when we're talking about food fraud, there are a number of ways of doing that. And we're going to talk about a little bit about these. There's substitution, uh, containment, there's theft, there's tampering, there's mislabeling, there's unapproved, excuse me, unapproved enhancements, there's counterfeiting, there's dilution. They're all components of food fraud. And under the FDA side, they have what they call economically motivated adulteration, which I'm going to talk about later on in the slide, so I won't get into it much right now. Because some food fraud, it definitely will have a product safety issue, which is where the FDA comes in. Where other food fraud is not necessarily a product safety issue. It can be just somebody substituting something for another, and you don't get the quality you want, or you're not getting the product that you paid for. So those are some of the ways of food fraud in the out in there in the marketplace. So global perspective, food fraud estimated between 10 and 50 billion. Now that's a lot. That's and there's a big disparity between 10 and 50 billion. That's part of it because it's very difficult to pin down. A lot of it is not always caught. Some of it is anticipated. Uh, so what the global cost involves, it includes consumer fraud, it includes supplier fraud, it processors doing illegal things. It could be the regulatory cost for the regulatory agencies to monitor food fraud and to take legal action. That's part of the cost. And also, it could be, the retailers themselves get part in costly part of the food fraud. So it's a huge, I won't call it industry. That's a huge dilemma, a huge problem, as I say, between 10 and 50 billion. And it affects roughly 10% of what we commercially sold food around the world. Again, that's fairly significant. Uh, so what does that do? Well, it basically erodes the public confidence in brands and regulators. And in today's world, the one thing that I think everybody pretty well understands or knows is that the consumer and the public demands are that they don't tolerate any deception. They don't want any. There's a zero tolerance for things like food fraud and poor quality and things like that. So the consumer is in the driver's seat as far as knowledge and as far as being able to move. And if they don't like something, or if they've been deceived, then the brand could be affected because they're going to move elsewhere and find somewhere else to get their product, so to speak.
All right. So during our FISMA Friday, we usually ask questions to the audience and we encourage you all to participate. So today's first question is, where does your food fraud program stand today? Is it A, we have a documented program we actively manage? B, we have the documentation, but it does not get used day to day? C, we're just getting started? Or D, we do not have one yet? Give you a few seconds to answer. Okay. And thank you for the audience who also share their answers in the chat as well. All right, we're going to close the poll now and take a look at the answers. All right, so the chat, Freeman says a majority of B, we have documentation, but it doesn't get used day to day. And then there's also, we've got a documented program we actively manage. Then a little bit of people who are just getting started.
Okay, well, that doesn't really surprise me. If we're dealing with processors, if there's a lot of processors on the line today, there are a lot of them that could be GFSI certified. Therefore, they would have a documented program that they actively manage. If you're a retailer, then I can understand maybe you have documentation, but it's not used every day, or you're maybe just getting started. So that doesn't surprise me as far as the division of the results.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's.
Okay, so we saw the previous slide where we talked about the different types of food fraud, and now I'll give you a little bit of a definition of what they are, and also some of the foods that are involved in that type of scenario. So we have substitution, which is very common. It replaces a high value ingredient with a cheaper one. As an example, substituting expensive species of seafood with a lower valued species, pollock, sole, cod. Just to give you, that's a personal one of mine. I live in the east coast of Canada, which is a very significant seafood processing place. And in the early 1990s, when I was with the government, we found that there were processors bringing in frozen pollock from the United States, and they were salting it, and then they were selling it as cod, salt cod. And the reason being is because salt cod was getting them roughly $2 more a pound. So that's basically why they did it, was because of that. And pollock and cod are very hard to distinguish. They're both, excuse me, they're both white fish. Look very much alike. Then we have dilution, where you mix a premium liquid with lower quality substance, adding sunflower oil to olive oil. That's very common. Uh, you've added corn syrup as an example, is another one, adding corn syrup to honey, where you think you're getting pure honey. Actually, you're getting a diluted honey that has a cheaper substance in it, such as corn syrup. Then you have counterfeiting, where you're copying a brand packaging, logos, and product designs. Using higher valued logos, such as organic, is an example of that. People see organic on a package and think it's organic, and then they don't realize it, but it could not be organic. Then you get mislabeling, which is fairly similar to counterfeiting, but it's false claims regarding the origins, nutrition, or expiry dates. As I say, it's very similar. And what they do is, if it's basically a money saving thing, they could have product that they're processing that's processed at the expiry date was coming up on, and then they just change the expiry date as example, so they can sell that product. So again, there's a number of mislabeling areas that are considered food fraud. Unapproved enhancements, adding illegal chemicals to improve product appearance or weight, adding to milk powder to artificially boost protein readings as an example. A lot of people nowadays are really keen on labels. They really looking at the protein element of their product that they're consuming. and that could give them some readings. Then you have diversion, selling authentic products outside of authorized distribution channels, and that is product being resold without any type of quality control, or a product that's been stolen. I know that I don't know whether it's happening now or not, but back about 20 years ago, you used to go to flea markets and you see product for sale in these flea markets, and sometimes that product was actually stolen product. And then you got forgery, where you're altering certificates, and that happens. That used to happen quite prevalently back in the 1990s, 2000, before e-certification came along. But people could alter their certificates, alter signatures, alter the description of the product. Again, those are all areas of food fraud that have taken place or are taking place, and those are the type of food fraud issues. Okay, so when did food fraud become a concern? Well, it's been a concern, but it really hit the prime time back in about 15, 20 years ago. Well, I guess about 13, 14 years ago, um, where they found in Europe, they tested the ground beef that was being sold, and they found out a majority of it, or a lot of it, was actually horse meat. And that brought food fraud right to the forefront. And the regulatory agencies around the world and the certified GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative, they took it up as a challenge, and they basically made changes to the regulations and to their third-party certification programs to try and combat food fraud, because the more they looked, the more they found that it was happening in more ways than one. So, what happens when you have food fraud? What are some of the risks that are involved with that? Well, number one is a health risk. Some food fraud can be a health risk, and that, you could have temporary or permanent health effects. You could have an undeclared allergen in a product, as an example, and it was mislabeled on purpose or whatever, and someone ate the food that they're allergic to. Could have serious side effects, or it could be even death in the case of if there's a serious allergy. There's other ways too. It can be a safety issue, the same mislabeling the product. Um, so then there's the economic risk that goes. A company is exposure to loss. If they have purchased product from a supplier that's not what it's supposed to be, then they use that product and their company gets involved in a situation, then they got an economic issue where it's going to cost them a significant amount of money involved. And then there's a regulatory risk. You got recall, you got a loss of registration that could happen. So, whenever you have a recall, a loss of registration, you also have a loss of your brand. You got people being laid off from work, losing their jobs. So that regulatory risk also transfers into the economic side of the house. So the three are sort of interlocked. They can all be one if you want to think about it. Okay, so now let's just briefly talk about some of the top foods that are involved in food fraud that have been disclosed over the years or in the last amount of time. The big one of the first ones is olive oil. It's diluted with less expensive oils, including, as I mentioned before, there's sunflower oil, palm oil, sesame seed. There's all kinds of oils. So that is very common in the olive oil world, because olive oil is a very demanding for health enthusiasts. It's also very expensive. So if you can make it cheaper, sell it cheaper, then and it's not true olive oil, then you've got that form of food fraud. Then you got milk, where you got contained vegetable oil or whey or cane sugar, or sometimes even formaldehyde, and basically it changes uh, the composition of milk. It's sold for less, of course, because it's not pure milk, and it could be a health hazard as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, honey. A lot of the times it could be I won't say tainted. It could be have corn syrup added to it, or sucrose syrup, or water even. Um, so a lot of people think they're getting pure honey, and they're not really getting it. Um, Honey is one of the foods that never goes bad. It's the only food I think that never goes bad. But if you have honey that has other things in it, you're going to find that over a period of time, that honey will go bad because the components in it will start to disintegrate or cause problems. So okay, then we got one of the most expensive spices, saffron. It often contains adulterants such as glycerin, dust. Seen it uh, in pepper actually been included in it as well. Uh, Marigold flowers, anything to take up the volume and disguise it. You may be getting 50% saffron. You may be getting 50% other ingredients. So that is a common one. Orange juice, where they'll add lemon juice or sugar water or extracts. Again, marigold again. Um, you think you're getting pure orange juice, you may not be getting the pure orange juice. And again, it's an economic thing, volume thing. A lot of times, coffee they're advertised as specialty coffee, where you actually can get brown barley in it, or you can get little twigs in it. Again, in coffee, there's I've seen where they've had roasted corn in it, ground up roasted corn. Uh, so again, you think you're getting your pure coffee. I forget Valdez there from Colombia. You may not be getting your pure coffee. Apple juice, similar to orange juice. Basically, you get sweeteners put into it, beet sugars, corn syrups. You maybe think you're getting pure apple juice, 100% apple juice, but you may not be getting that. Tea is a one where it's common where they actually found sawdust into it. Uh, and then there's also starch, and so there's other things you can get into tea. So that is commonly adulterated and for food fraud as well. And then, as I mentioned already, fish species identification. We talked about the pollock going to haddock. We've had instances where people would take I don't know whether you know what a skate is, but it's a flat fish, something like a sunray, and they would take the flesh and punch holes in it, and then sell the punched out portions as scallops. The scallops are much more valuable. So that's happened. They'll call them scallop medallions as an example. So that is common in the fish species. They did, just as an example, they did a survey in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I can't remember the year, but it's not been that long ago, maybe 5 years ago. In the restaurants in Nova Scotia, and they found roughly a third of the restaurants that were serving fish on their menus were not serving the fish that was described in the menus. If you thought you're getting red snapper, you might have been getting something totally different. You might have been getting ocean perch. You might have been getting tilapia or something like that. So they were substituting the lower quality and lower costly fish for the more expensive ones, and that is becoming more and more prevalent because of the fact that the Canadian government has cut back the quotas for haddock, which is a common, very popular whitefish here in Canada and the U.S., which is used mainly in your fish and chips. Cod and haddock are used the two made used in your fish and chips, and they're being substituted by, say, ocean perch or something like that because of the cost, and they cut back in the quotas. And then we get into the declarations where people think they're buying kosher certified or halal certified or organic certified, and they may not have been probably mixed where they don't have the official certification, but they're using that on their labels, and people get duped into thinking they're getting those. And then we have the black pepper, which is, I think, the last one on our list, where it's been substituted with buckwheat. It's interesting. Black pepper can be part of the food fraud, but black pepper also can be used on the other side, were used as a filler in some of the spices, more expensive spices. So it's on both ends of the spectrum, so to speak. Okay, so those are some of the common food fraud items, the more popular ones. There are other ones we could probably, if we thought about it, we probably could think of, each one of us could think of some specific ones. So why is food fraud increasing? Well, it's a number of reasons. It's basically the food chain is getting much more complicated. Uh, the buyers used to have they used to buy uh, from local suppliers or someone they trusted totally in, when they were buying their ingredients or buying products. But now with the world opening up, you can buy from anywhere in the world. So these supply chains are getting very complex. So when everything gets more complex, then it basically opens up the door for increased food fraud. The second part is it's challenging times. As I just mentioned about the cutting in quotas of the popular seafood here in North America, the haddock, whereas they treat that with lower expensive species. So they can't get the haddock, so they'll change it for something else. It's very challenging. And then there's pressure on unscrupulous suppliers to commit food fraud. It's there. It's an everyday occurrence that where you have unscrupulous suppliers and they're putting pressure on for people to buy their products. So it's not a local issue. It's not a national issue. It's a global, worldwide issue. Food fraud. It's not going away. We're trying their best to adapt and bring things into control, but it has been difficult. So, what are some of the economic drivers? We just briefly talked with some of them already. High rewards. If you put in a cheaper product and sell it as a more expensive product, you get the higher rewards, better profit margins. Uh, there is low risk right now, although it's getting better, but there is a low risk because detection rates are historically low. And it's usually comes from the market pressure where it comes from customers or consumers. They're the ones that actually identify certain issues, and then the government will follow up on those issues. So there is intent pressure in the marketplace for these competitions to make sure that you're a store and you got a store down the road. They're selling their product for dollar less a pound than what you can sell yours for. Then there's a question about that, but it puts pressure on you to do the same thing because if you can't sell your product, then you can't stay in business. So there's the market pressure, there's the risk of not being detected, and then you've got the high reward taking place. So those are all the big drivers that bring food fraud to the forefront. And as I mentioned before, you have supply chain for complexity. You have globalization, as I mentioned. Uh, ABC Bakery used to buy all his supplies from ingredient suppliers within the maybe a 200-mile kilometer or 200-mile radius or within the next state or whatever. But now it's global. You can get pretty well anything where you want for discounted prices, and that's what they're looking for is the best price. So multiple borders, multiple international borders are in play here as far as the complexity of the supply chain. Then you add brokers into the situation, which they really come into the food safety world in big time, so to speak. They're intermediaries. They're basically there to make profit. They don't know much about food safety. Or some do, but most of them are not aware of food safety. They just know that you want something and they're going to find it, and it may not be exactly what they ordered, but they don't understand that, and then they'll sell it to you to the processor for as an ingredient, and it's not what it's supposed to be. So brokers add a complexity to the equation as well. And then you got the visibility, raw material visibility drops with every processing step. So you could bring something in, you use it as an ingredient, but once the ingredient's been used in your product, it's very difficult to ascertain whether or not uh, food fraud had taken place, because it's unless you do an ingredient test, then it's going to go undetected. So those are some of the key elements of how complex the situation is in trying to uh, detect food fraud. So what are some of the consequences? Well, as I already mentioned earlier, is that some people will substitute products, and when they do, they may substitute an allergen. So you get a hidden allergen in a product. If it's a peanut and someone's severely allergic to peanuts, it could actually be a deadly situation. So those are one of the biggest consequences. The other one, you could add toxic chemicals into the situation, where you have industrial dyes, or could be maybe lead or a heavy metal in there that you don't know about, or at a concentration it shouldn't be. And then when you do create a product that doesn't have the ingredients in it that it's supposed to, then you've changed the nutrition of that product. And if you're a vulnerable population, such as infants or elderly people, and you think you're getting, if you're an older person, you're thinking you're getting a high dosage of proteins or something like that, and you're not getting it. Um, so now you have malnutrition coming into play here. So those are some of the public health consequences, and they're severe at times. So then we get into the brand damage, and we've already talked about that. The recalls can take place. Then once you get recalls, you get bankruptcy possibility, and then people lose confidence in the marketplace. A single scandal can depress sales. I don't know if anybody out there has ever heard of the 110-100 rule. I like to, when I do my training, I like to use as an example. If a processor finds a problem right at the beginning of a process, like say it's an ingredient coming in, and he finds out that that ingredient's not what, or he or she finds that ingredient's not what it's supposed to be, and for him to correct that, or for that processing plant to correct that, it costs them $1 to correct it, because they can refuse shipment or whatever. But say then what happens is they bring in that ingredient, but they don't notice it right away, and they produced all this product, but it doesn't go out the door. But they produced all this product with the ingredient that's what it's supposed to be. Now for them to correct the problem, it costs them 10 times more to correct it, because now they got product they produced, they got wages they paid, they got basically supplies that they cannot sell now. So now it costs $10 to correct that problem. And then what happens if they don't detect that problem, and the problem gets out in the marketplace and they get into recall? Now it costs 100 times more to correct that problem, because you're going to get into a recall. You may have bankruptcy problems. You may have loss of brand problems. You may have legal liability problems where you're being sued. So just keep that 110-100 rule when someone might tell you that it's not costly if it gets out in the marketplace. Okay, so I'm going to probably move up a little bit quicker here because we're moving ahead. Uh, So then you get the legal and regulatory side of the house, where you get fines. You could get jail time. You, as I mentioned, you could get lawsuits. So the regulatory are coming into play more and more every day. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the regulatory side now. It's not at the top of the regulatory's agenda. It hasn't been in Canada or the U.S. Uh, they have strong regulations on paper now, but the enforcement is often reactive and resource limited, as I've already mentioned. It tends to be uncovered after economic or safety damage occurs, and it usually comes from customer complaints or industry trade complaints. It's not because the regulators are out there actively looking for food fraud. It's always coming from a reactive side of the house rather than a proactive. Okay. So in Canada, we have the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, have the Safe Food for Canadian regulations, and the Food and Drug regulations, which is basically for labeling and adulteration. And uh, and then in the U.S., we have the Food and Drug Modernization, the Food Safety Modernization Act under FDA. which includes intentional adulteration rule. And then you have the meat products come under the U.S. Department of Agriculture for ensuring that the products are labeled accordingly and that they have supply chains in place that ensure that the supplies coming into the processors are what they're supposed to be. And globally, you have Codex Alimentarius Commission sets the standards, and the EU, European Food Safety Authority, and EU Food Fraud Network enforcement in place. So it is global, not global, but it is growing bigger as far as the regulatory side. So under the CFI, you have the Safe Food Canadian regulations for food misrepresentation, and you also have strict selling of packaging and or importing products that are false, misleading, or deceptive in manner. So that's how they capture food fraud is through those type of sections of the regulations. Although not specifically identified as food fraud, it can be captured in the preventive control program where hazards such as allergens must be identified. You have to have some approved supplier and verification of suppliers required now. Your incoming ingredients must be controlled, must be from approved suppliers. They have to be monitoring of these suppliers. So that's how the CFIA ensures that the processing sector in Canada is abiding by the regulations. In the US, you have what they call economically motivated adulteration or EMAs. And these were the definition is basically a fraudulent, intentional substitution or addition of a substance in a product for the purpose of increasing the apparent value of that product or reducing the cost of its production, economic gain. So that's the US FDA through their regulations. And they basically have when you do your HACCP plans and the processing plans, you have to identify the hazards, EMA hazards in your food safety plan, and that's how they're capturing food fraud in the regulations. And these are the pertinent sections: 21, Part 117 for human food, and 21, Part 507 for animal food. And as I mentioned, the facilities must evaluate whether EMAs can introduce a food safety hazard. And that's where the FDA, you can go to the next slide, but that's where the FDA actually concentrates their effort on is the food safety side. Is that it could be a food fraud, but it's basically on the food safety side that they're concerned with, not so much on the other types of food frauds that we talked about. But basically, the regulations, each facility must conduct a written hazard analysis. They must explicitly evaluate known or reasonably unforeseeable hazards, such as EMAs, and then they have to have a mitigation plan in place to control any identified hazards for economically motivated adulteration. So on this one, I'd like to just concentrate on that second bullet. If a fraudulent act does not pose a health risk, i.e. mislabeling standard honey as organic, it bypasses this section of the regulations. But then it could be captured under the labeling side. But as far as the economically motivated adulteration EMAs for hazards, that is sort of one of the weaknesses of the FDA side of the house. Okay. Okay. Elise?
All right, so we've got the second question here that we're interested in hearing from you, the audience. Has your team evaluated economically motivated adulteration in your hazard analysis? So A, yes, and we have preventive controls in place for it. B, yes, but we're not confident it would hold up on audit day. C, we know we need to, and we have not done it yet. Or D, we're not sure whether this applies to us. Let's see what the results are. Okay, people continue to answer. All right, let's get closing the poll. Oh, one more. All right, so the majority of the results, Freeman, are yes, but we're not confident it would hold up on audit day.
Okay. All right. Basically, you probably have a food safety, food fraud program in place that probably meets what we call the GFSI scheme, but the GFSI scheme does not meet the would not necessarily meet the food fraud for the uh, FDA. So that may be why you think it may not hold up on audit day. I'm not sure, but um, that's the only reason I could think of. Because if you do have a food fraud program in place, hopefully it's being monitored and that you're being active in ensuring that you're protecting your process as well as the product going out the door.
Thank you. Great insight. Let's continue with the presentation.
Okay. So briefly, we talked about third-party certification. We talked about the regulatory side, how they've enhanced their regulations. The CFI came in place in 2019, and FSMA came in a little bit before that on food fraud. Third-party certification, they answered the bell after basically after this Horse Gate situation, and SQF, BRC, FSE 22000, those certification programs now have a strong global food safety, food fraud program element to it. And in fact, they're enhancing them all the time. Um, BRC came out with their latest edition about 3 years ago where they enhanced the food fraud requirements, and SQF has done the same thing. So it mandates protection against all food fraud types, not just food safety types, but all food fraud types that we talked about previously. And it targets both deception and the safety hazards. So that's the key difference between the FDA side and the global food safety side. So there are two pillars of defense in food fraud. It requires a documented what we call a food fraud vulnerability assessment, and then it requires a documented food fraud mitigation plan. So when you've done your vulnerability assessment, what that is that you've looked at your operation, you've identified where your weaknesses are in the food fraud side of the house, whether it's supplier approval chain, or whether it could be something such as your labeling side of the house. There are a number of areas where you could have a problem with the food fraud. So once you've identified those, you have to identify how you're going to overcome those weaknesses or problems and have a mitigation plan to ensure that you're going to combat that and that the product that you receive is not going to be fraudulent and that the product you're sending out the door is not fraudulent. So, okay, yeah. Oh, that was a quick one. All right.
Yeah, right. Okay, so third poll question. How do you manage a food fraud vulnerability assessment and mitigation plan today? Is it A, in a dedicated software system, B, in spreadsheets and shared files, C, across email binders and the people who know where things are, or D, we've not built one yet? Let's get started on answering. Very interesting. All right, we'll start closing the polls now. Okay, so, yep, the results are in. The majority is in spreadsheets and shared files. And we've got a few across email binders and then another few in a dedicated software system.
Well, the good thing here is no one said that we haven't built one yet. That's a good thing. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether you have a dedicated software system or whether it's spreadsheet, as long as you have a good system in place and that you're not just developing it and setting on the side of the desk, you're actively implementing it, monitoring it. That's the key. So whether it's a hard copy system or whether it's a software system, just as long as it works for you, that's a good thing.
Great.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges of food fraud? As I mentioned already, there's limited regulatory involvement due to other priorities, especially on the food safety side. And recalls, a lot of recalls, and we get the cyclospora thing going on, as you've seen. The use of this foreign suppliers are not controlled by uh, the government, and I may be a little bit biased here, but I do believe the U.S. and Canadian governments are very well positioned, and you know, any suppliers in the states, not any, but most suppliers in the states and in Canada, they come under some really good regulatory regimes. So you know, I don't. I guess I'm promoting North America here. But anyway, when you get into the global world, you don't know exactly what's happening out there. And then there's the difficulty in distinguishing natural versus synthetic. You know, vanilla extract versus vanilla. You know, very difficult to tell the difference. Uh, and it's very difficult in having cost efficient testing available. As an example, back to my days in the 1990s where we had the pollock substituted for cod, the only way we could take any regulatory action, we had to do DNA testing to show that it wasn't cod. And that DNA testing at the time was very, very costly. So that's some of the example. That's an example of testing that is costly. So the impacts, there are three main areas. You have health risks we've already talked about. They're a concern due to the allergens, such as gluten-free versus regular wheat, peanut oil used instead of regular oil that's not been declared. Then you have loss of confidence by the consumer if a company is found to not follow protocols. And if someone has a recall, as an example, and that recall is public, it's in the public domain, it affects not, you know, you may not have been affected, but now you've seen that company out there, and you're going to probably stay away from it because of that. So there's loss of confidence, even if you haven't bought their product. And though not an impact on the consumer, is a huge impact on companies where they now could be involved in legal action because of the food fraud side of the house. So those are some of the more intense impacts to consumers. So impacts to industry, and I briefly mentioned these during the presentation anyway. You get erosion of your brand integrity, especially if it's a recall. You get increased compliance costs. Supply chain instability could occur. You've got a competitive disadvantage for the honest suppliers because they're buying the more expensive and true ingredients, where a firm could be misrepresenting their product or consumers buying a brand that used an ingredient that wasn't true. You've got need now greater regulatory scrutiny and audits are going to take place, and now you've got legal processes just mentioned, and then the worst one is, to me, is causing harm to the consumer. Nobody wants to get sick or get hurt or die. That is the biggest consequence, not only to the industry, to globally, so to speak, to every part of the food safety spectrum. So, what are some of the solutions? Some of the solutions are already in place. I've already mentioned some of them. You get strong controls now throughout the food production distribution chain to ensure fraudulent practices are kept to a minimum. They're not kept at bay, or not kept totally out of the picture, but they are reducing them. Processors are now using various databases found through the food safety world to ensure their suppliers are not performing fraudulent activities. There's a US FDA has a database. Michigan State University has one. Uh, Horizon Global is one as example. I shouldn't be promoting ones, but you know, uh, I just want to make sure that you know there's some out there. There's a lot more out there as well. And when a processor wants to look at someone, they can go in these databases and see if there's any history of fraudulent activity by a specific supplier of a specific product. There's verification activities such as random testing of products, creating your own database of your own suppliers, knowing your suppliers, having a trending analysis of your suppliers, and then buying from suppliers or people or customers that are GFSI certified because they have those controls in place. And then you have the FSMA requirements, and in Canada you have the Safe Food Canadian requirements for ensuring that processors and importers have these controls in place.
Okay, so we're going to go through the last question of the day. So, what slows your team down most when verifying suppliers and incoming materials? Is it A, chasing and tracking COAs and certificates? B, keeping supplier approvals and documents current? C, pulling the proof together quickly on audit day? Or D, we have this handled well? Let's see what the audience responds. Okay, let's close the poll for the second time because we do want to go through a Q&A as well for some pre-submitted questions. All right. Well, Freeman, it seems like the majority is the thing that's slowing down the audience's team is keeping supplier approvals and documents current.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me. And to be honest with you, I think that goes hand in hand with pulling the proof together quickly on audit day, because of the fact that when you're audited, you have to make sure everything is current and up to date. Your COAs are up to date. You have all the records there, and there is a lot of documentation. I won't beat around the bush there when it comes to documentation. It changes regularly. Sometimes you have to change suppliers. Therefore, you got to go through all the documentation. So yeah, I can fully understand why it's very high on the keeping documents current and supplier approvals up to date.
Yeah, thank you. Let's continue with the presentation.
Okay. Okay, so we're just wrapping up now. Some of the things that we just maybe consumers to be aware. If it's too good to be true, then I think everybody's heard that. My father said it to me many, many years ago. If it's too good to be true, it probably is not. It's not. Uh, so, how can you be on top of things yourself as a consumer? Well, you can buy from known sources and retailers, one that you trust and the one you know that over the years they've always been good and they've always been what we call good corporate citizens. The other one, and more people are doing this nowadays, is read your labels carefully. As I mentioned, scallop medallions does not mean they're whole scallops. You got to look. Sometimes these labels are very tricky, and you got to be very careful how they're describing their product. And then look for trusted certifications. As I mentioned, you got SQF, you got BRC. There's other certifications out there too, like USDA organic certification. That's another one. And then you've got there's certain companies that provide the halal and the kosher designations. So just make sure they're trusted certifications. High-end products are more susceptible. So if you're buying something that very, very expensive, like beef nowadays is very expensive. So if you're buying a filet mignon or a porterhouse steak or a ground beef, which is more expensive nowadays, they're more susceptible to food fraud. And then always be on the alert. The public domain out there, the social media. You've got the FDA website. You've got public notices going out. You've got the news wires going out there. I think cyclospora has been on the news now for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Then you're always seeing recalls due to allergens, undeclared allergens, and salmonella on lettuce and things like that. So just be alert and make sure you see the alerts that come out so that you're aware of them.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Freeman. Your presentation was very, very insightful. And it has me quite dubious about going food shopping now. But thank you. It's been very insightful nonetheless. So it's time for our Q&A, and we got a couple of questions that were asked at the time of our audience registering. So the first question reads, some commodity prices have been swinging hard, for example, cocoa, coffee, olive oil. How should a manufacturer decide which ingredients actually belong in their vulnerability assessment this year versus just working off a generic high risk list that may be a step behind the market?
Well, there are a number of ways. One I've already talked about. There are uh, companies out there that are very diligent, and one of the ones was Horizon Scan. They update their system constantly, and same thing with Michigan State. I think they update there constantly, and there are other sites out there. They update them constantly. They try to stay ahead as much as they possibly can. And when there are large swings, and it could be for other reasons. As an example, vanilla uh, about 3 years ago skyrocketed. It went from, I don't know what the price it went. I think the price went something like 20 times higher than normal, but it had to do with a wipeout of the vanilla crop in Africa. I think that's where it was. So what you can do is whenever you do have an issue where you have high skyrocketing prices all of a sudden, is go to all the various outlets that you can think of, such as the news outlets, to see, and you can go into the public, the government domains, such as agriculture and FDA, and see if there's anything there. Or you can get into the private ones, such as I mentioned before, Horizon Scan. And somewhere along the line, you will find that if there is anything that's out of the ordinary, or it's because of a food fraud situation, is that it's been highlighted somewhere, that you can take that into your uh, context when you're doing your vulnerability assessment.
Thank you very much, Freeman. Well, we're at time, and that's what happens when we're in live events. We certainly really appreciated your insights, Freeman, and look forward to a further presentation in the forthcoming months. Now, and we'll see you soon.
All right, thank you very
Thank
much,
you, Freeman.
everyone.
Thank you. Now, off to announcing the next FISMA Friday. It'll happen on Friday, August 28th, and the presenter will be Cameron Prince, and the topic will be the inside the CFIA, the inspection blitz, and what inspectors actually look for. The registration is open now, so you may go ahead and register. Thank you, everyone, again for attending today. You may be able to find more resources available for you either on the Atchison Group website or Safety Chain's websites, where we have industry e-guides, other past webinars, videos, success stories, and so forth. We are, again, thank you for attending today, and we are going to follow up with an email sending you a recap of today's very insightful presentation, as well as next steps if you're interested. Take care, everyone, and see you next month.